Okay, so now we're going to talk about the next part of the pillars of state. We've talked about body. Now we're going into focus. What does focus really mean? Focus basically means, what are we putting our attention on? What are we focused on? If you imagine we're going through this life and kind of got tunnel around us, and we're putting our focus somewhere. That's kind of how it is in life, that our focus is always on something. And we need to be aware of, what is it on? Is it on things that are empowering our lion and our best self, or is it on things that are disempowering that lion and, making the hyena be empowered? Because whichever direction we go, our focus is going in one of those two directions. And so we got to understand that. We also need to understand that focus is something that can shift our state of mind more long term. And before, I had said that the pillars of state have actually saved lives. Well, focus is one of the things that has saved several lives of people that I know. And one person in particular was actually very, very suicidal before he came to a Master Power Within event. He learned about the pillars of state, he learned about focus, and in particular, he learned about one aspect of focus. It saved his life. He had a wife and a little baby at the time that he was feeling suicidal. This one pillar saved that entire family for generations to come. So let me ask you this. Is it important to understand focus and how to use it in your life? Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. We can't underestimate it. So what is it about focus that changes everything for us, and how can we use it? Well, for him, I mentioned that there was one aspect of focus that really shifted things for him, and it was something called a quality question. Now, I know you've heard about that in Master Power Within through Brandon Broadwater, and likely you've heard about it because he talks about how our brain is an answering machine. We ask a question, we get an answer. That's how it goes. And so we need to actually understand this. So if this is our brain, and I know you're going to be thinking, wow, that's a fantastic brain. It kind of looks like a cloud, Connie, but I know it's a brain. I know my drawing is just stellar, but stay with me. It does look like a cloud. Imagine it's a brain. Imagine it's a brain. Okay, so if we ask, so this is our focus, what we're focused on. If we ask a question like this, if we ask a poor quality question, well, what happens? What does our brain do? Our brain's an answering machine, right? We ask a question, we get an answer, right? So we ask a poor quality question, we get a poor quality answer. So we ask a poor quality question, and suddenly we get, our mind goes into the filing folder and thinks of the 50 million things that we have done wrong in our life, and manage to come up with several examples to answer that poor quality question. Why am I always messing up? Oh, don't worry, my mind will go through the filing box of every single time I've messed up since the time I was 2, and come up with all the different file folders and examples of why I always mess up. Now we need to understand that, because this is not reality. This is our focus. We are focused on, why am I always messing up? And that's what we're going to come up with. How do we feel when we do this kind of stuff? Well, you probably guessed it. We feel not good. Our emotions are lower emotions. And the other thing we need to understand is, who does this empower in terms of that battle within? Well, we got to understand this. It empowers the hyena, that the hyena is empowered when we do that. Now, what about on the other side of things, when our brain is asking good quality questions? Well, you probably guessed it. Good quality questions equals good quality answers, equals we feel happier. So why is that? Why is that? Why would asking a question shift our experience of things? Like, this is a pretty dramatic difference. And in fact, there's one question that can shift it in the most dramatic way. It's the most surefire way to shift things. And you likely know what it is. It is one of the highest quality questions. What am I grateful for? What am I grateful for? We ask that question and we can change everything. I remember a time when there was a lady that I was working with, and she had small children at the time. She was in her bed. She hadn't slept all night. Her kids were sick and they had thrown up on her. She was feeling the worst. And she was sitting in that moment feeling like everything is going wrong. You know how, if you ever been sleep deprived for a really long time? Well, if you have a baby, you're just sleep deprived for a very extended period of time, and so you start thinking differently. So she's laying in her bed, she's, kids have thrown up on her, she's feeling the worst. But she remembered this question. And so she started asking, what am I grateful for? And at first nothing came, and she just kept laying there. She's like, what am I grateful for? What am I grateful for? She kept asking the question, what am I grateful for? What am I grateful for? What am I grateful for? Until she got an answer. And she realized in that moment that she was grateful for everything. That she was grateful that her kids were well enough to still be with her. And that she was grateful for, being up all night, because that meant she could take care of her babies all night, and that they were alive and they were with her and they were well. She was grateful for everything. But it wasn't until she asked that question, and she asked that question consistently and over and over and over until she got an answer, that she got an answer. Did that shift the entire rest of her day? Absolutely. So we need to understand why this is so important, why we need to pull these questions out, because like I said, quality questions have saved lives. Why is that? Well, there's actually a really interesting scientific reason for it. And the reason is this. I know, just wait, you're gonna see the awesome brain drawing again. The brain cloud. That when we are in a place of stress, when something happens that stresses us out, we actually physically respond in a different way. And I'm going to show you why. What happens is, if we are stressed, a part of our brain, the hypothalamus is activated. That's a part that's dealing with the stress. And what happens after that is we get these chemicals, and these hormones are released into our body, and one of them is cortisol. I hope I spelled that right. Cortisol. Anyways, one of the chemicals is cortisol, and what happens with that is we actually think different. Cortisol affects our sex drive. It lowers our sex drive, and actually it affects if we gain weight or if we don't, if we hang on to fat as well. We need to understand that as well in terms of health. But we also need to understand that a different part of our brain is making the decision in that moment. It is a different driver driving the bus. And so if you can imagine making that decision, you're stressed out, the part of your brain that deals with stress is activated, you got cortisol pumping through your body, someone new is in the driver's seat. And so, I think it's an I, cortisol. Okay, so anyways, and then, so we need to understand that we're making a decision with this. And what happens then if a stress, so this is just, we also got to understand that here before this, there's a stimulus, right? So something happens, there's an experience that happens. And in our brain, actually this is why we have to talk about meaning as well, because our brain decides the meaning of what just happened. And then we decide if we're stressed or not. If we decide, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing ever, and we get stressed about it, then this tends to happen and we tend to make not as good decisions. If we decide that something, we decide to use our focus and shift what we're going to focus on, that actually changes the meaning instantly. So cool how they work together. But if we shift our focus and we do this one thing, it changes the entire course of what's going to happen next. And it actually changes the driver's seat of who's driving your brain. It's crazy how powerful this is. And there's scientific research studying this, that when you do this next thing, it changes which part of your brain is activated. That's nuts. Isn't that amazing? Okay, I just think that's so incredible. Okay, so if we ask some sort of logical question, it completely changes what part of your brain is in the driver's seat. So for example, you're totally stressed out. Something's happened, somebody made you mad. You decide that, oh my gosh, that person made me mad and I'm stressed out. And then all of a sudden, actually I should go like this, kind of choose a different route. All of a sudden, let me take this out, because we're still stressed, but we went this way. All of a sudden you ask a logical question. What did I have for breakfast? Am I wearing shirt or pants? What's it like outside? What's the temperature? Doesn't matter what it is. It changes our brain. All of a sudden goes, oh, you want me to drive now? And that part of your brain, I think it's the left side of your brain if I'm not mistaken, takes over and is now in the driver's seat. So what happens with that? Well, suddenly you're not having any more cortisol floating through your body. And then this is the part that is making the decisions. So you're gonna have a very, very different decision. Now, actually, now that I think about it, I really wanna leave this highlighted, because the cool thing about this is we don't have to go to stress first. We can know, if we know this and something happens, a stimulus happens, so something happens, we get in an argument with somebody, or we're stressed out about something, they're worried about money, worried about our work, worried about something, we can do something up here to not go down the stress path and avoid it totally. And we can go towards asking logical questions and putting that part of our brain in the driver's seat. We need to understand that. The other thing we need to understand is that in between here, the stimulus and what this is really our response. We have control over that. And we have control over that through the meaning we put on it. So my question for you is, before we dive into meaning, what is your takeaway from this?